Hi guys, welcome to the video. Today I'd like to talk about the future of the family and where I think the family is going to end up in the society of the future. What will it look like? I'm told we're in a reset right now. So what will the future family look like? Where is this going to go? And how will that impact me? And how will that impact you and your future plans? So I came to think about this just a few months ago. I've been Mgtow for 21 years now, so I've never planned to have children, ever, or get married or cohabit with anybody. I've just been living some sort of like, I don't know, playboy lifestyle for 21 years. And I did a video around 6 months ago concerning that I'd been Mgtow for 20 years and what it would been like. And there were two reactions that caught my eye from people who watched that video. The first reaction, these people called themselves these antinatalists, and they had this philosophy called antinatalism. And they believed that because they didn't choose to exist, they don't owe anybody anything, including the society, their religion, God, anybody. They don't owe anybody anything, so they don't have to have kids, get married, or do anything. And that was their argument, and they actually strongly supported my decision to go Mgtow and spend my life as a single guy, because it fitted in with their philosophy of existence, their existential philosophy. Then there was another group, and these guys, they were kind of like trolls. They were like YouTube trolls, like internet trolls. And they were saying that I was an idiot because I'd betrayed my ancestors, and that because I wasn't continuing the bloodline and the family line. So I was like, okay, I'm an open-minded guy, quite conscientious. So I thought, okay, I thought about both arguments that my viewers had. They're diametrically opposed to one another. And I thought that the antinatalists were a little bit childish. I didn't think their philosophy makes much sense to me. They're saying, like, you don't owe anybody anything because you didn't choose to be here. Okay, all right. But, like, that, for me, I live in this hotel here. That's like saying to me, I'm not going outside this hotel because I didn't choose the weather. I didn't get to choose the weather, so I'm not leaving my hotel. It's the similar argument. It's kind of like, since I'm not God, I don't owe anybody anything, or something like that. It's kind of like a godless philosophy. And I don't really have much time for it. It sounds a little bit childish, and they're just trying to use a very simple argument to avoid responsibilities to society and other humans. Now, the trolls, they were saying I was betraying my ancestors, and I was weak for not having children and stuff like that. And I considered both arguments by both sides, the trolls and the antinatalists, and I chose the trolls. I think the trolls were right. Their argument was pretty good. If you exist, and I do, and if you can have children, then I'm not sure why you shouldn't. I mean, life is short, you're only here once, it's something to experience, I'm sure. So if you can do it, and it fits in with your lifestyle, why not? The only people that might not have kids is those who can't, and also those that are members of religious orders. Okay, they're having some other religious vocation. So, okay. So I sided with the trolls. And I made that video in November, and by January, I decided, yeah, the trolls are right. I should have kids if I can. Financially, I'm quite secure, mentally well. I'm like, okay, My life is pretty nice. I could have kids if I wanted to. Now, I'm Mgtow. I don't cohabit with women. I don't get married and stuff like that. So I had to think of a way to have kids while staying Mgtow. You know, it's not entirely easy. So I had to think about this. And I did some study. I had some conversations with my friends, my intellectual friends. And I concluded that the model that's very popular these days, the isolated family, it's no longer working out for the majority of the population. The isolated family became popular after the rise of Protestantism, maybe especially after 1800s. After the 1800s, the peasants in Europe began to become educated. And the isolated family arose because the children were being educated, so they couldn't work. They were no longer allowed to labor constantly. So after around 1800, and increasingly after 1800, you know, the economic status of children switched from being a surplus member of the family to a consumer. They were producers, and then they became consumers. Education wasn't that expensive, but it can be a little bit expensive. So the kids had to be sent to school, and someone had to pay for the education. And that's why the modern form of marriage arose. You know, there had to be a marriage contract. The parents had to own some assets first, usually land. And so, because the state needed one man, especially one man, or one woman, but it's usually one man, to take responsibility for educating the children, the individual children. So this isolated family model became increasingly popular with nation states because it could identify and isolate one man as being the sole responsible party for the education of the children of his wife. Now, the children might not be his, but he's still responsible for their education. All right? So the isolated family became increasingly popular with the powers that be. It was pushed on the population. And now, after 200 years, we have a lot of data on the isolated family model. I think it has worked for a minority of the population, especially the wealthy, the highly intelligent, but not always. You know, they fail too. But the majority of the population, I believe, has failed. The isolated family has failed the humans. We can see, we have data, you know. Look at the data on Valium addiction by housewives in the 1960s in the United States. It was endemic. And then after the Valium addiction craze, the humans they switched to marijuana, heroin, opium, ecstasy, all these other drugs. The chronic amounts of mental illness that's prevalent in society in these isolated family model, you know. These isolated families, a lot of mental illness, obesity, physical ill health. So we know, we have the data. Me and my friends, we have all the data. I can just pick up the phone and I can find out anything I want. We have all the data. The physical fitness of a human being in the 1800s was extraordinary. Average waist size was like probably 28 inches for an adult male. They were very fit, very strong. The humans were very strong before 1800, and over the last 200 years, they have disintegrated physically. Mentally, I think they've disintegrated too, and I think also with respect to I'm not sure if the moral character has improved or just improved, but I'm not sure where that's going. It seems to be quite a breakdown in moral standards in the last few centuries, last few decades. A lot of weird stuff is now accepted as normal. Okay, so a lot of like immoral practices and actions are considered acceptable now. Okay, so after the 200 years of this isolated family model, I think I can make the judgment now that it has failed. It has not worked for the majority of the humans. The humans are unhappy in these isolated families. Now we'll analyze why. Well, essentially, psychologically, I don't think humans have evolved to live in isolated families. Historically, humans lived in small clannish and tribal groups. Everyone around them in the near proximity was some sort of relative. Second cousin, first cousin, but they knew everybody. They were blood relations, they're near neighbors for the most part. The idea that like you'd live with a woman, or if you're a woman, you live with a man who's not your blood relationship, within a family, in a house, an isolated house somewhere. No humans have ever done that in history. Humans never evolved to live like that. So I would say that humans, it's an unnatural state, and it's not working out. Before 1700, we had a very stable state family arrangement called the extended family in Europe and Eurasia. It's very common still in China. And essentially what it is that you have very close proximity to your blood family, your blood relatives, and back then in Europe in the 1700s, usually a woman would just get pregnant with some fellow, but she'd stay with her own extended family, where her extended family's from. This idea like that a guy would build a house somewhere and she would then go to the house and live with him, and that didn't happen. That didn't happen. The average human just had sex, got pregnant, the woman, and stayed with her extended family. And the man would visit sometimes the biological father, and maybe give gifts, some food and stuff like that, but they wouldn't live together. That almost never happened. Maybe it happened a little bit in the nobility, but apart from that, it was extremely rare. The average human, between the fall of Rome and 1700s Europe, they lived in encampments, townships, villages, and women stayed very close to their biological relatives. Even if they had children, they stayed close to their family. In China, I think the woman moved and lived with the man's family, but they had a slightly different model, but it was still an extended family model. The other reason why I think the isolated family is failing and continually failing is that it's thermodynamically inefficient. It's just extraordinary how much resources are required to build infrastructure to these isolated families. Electricity, road, plumbing, pipes. It's cost a lot of money to build, and then it costs a lot of money to maintain. The houses themselves are thermodynamically inefficient. The heat in a suburban house, it just escapes the house. It doesn't keep the humans warm, so it requires continual heating in the winter. If you look at the large superstructures in European cities, they don't need continual heating because they can share heat. The heat isn't lost immediately. You can heat more than one human family. So I think the isolated family has failed for two reasons. In summary, It's thermodynamically inefficient, and humans have not evolved to live with people who are not their blood relatives in an isolated house. Okay? That's my take on things. Works for some people, but we know that it doesn't work for most of them. We know that from the divorce statistics and the reports from married people. Most married people are not happy in these isolated families. All right, so if I'm going to have children, and those YouTube trolls want me to have kids, then I had to come up with a new idea to facilitate that. And so what I did was, I thought about it in January, and I decided that I'd have a different family model based off the old one in the 1700s in Europe. Essentially, I believe that I should just have children with a woman or women, and the children should be raised by the woman with her extended family. And if she needs financial support and I can help her, then I will. If not, then I won't. And so I think, and then obviously we should use the modern technology to ensure that the next generation is the highest possible quality. Now, when we look at the modern humans, most of them just have sex with, when they're drunk or something like that, or on drugs or whatever. But for me, I think we should use IVF treatment, because if you use IVF, you can do a DNA analysis of the eggs of the fetus. You can check to see if there's any genetic abnormalities. You can also select the best fetus. So if you use IVF, you might have like 9 fetuses to choose from. You can do a DNA analysis of all of them, pick the sex that you want, boy or girl, and then do implantation of the selected embryo. Okay? This is very efficient. You can find another partner on the internet. You don't have to go on dates. You don't have to weasel your way into someone's affections. You don't have to fool anybody, lie, cheat. There's none of that. You just go on the internet, find someone who wants to have a kid, and use IVF treatment, and you have a kid together. There's no marriage costs. If you look at the cost of even a wedding now, it would probably be equal to the education of a child in some countries. It's crazy. If you get married, the purpose is to produce children, and the best possible children. You don't waste your money on a wedding ceremony. Those are expensive. They can be very expensive now. So why would you do that? The old way is just too inefficient. So I think we should use the modern technology, IVF, genetic analysis, and other tools to produce the next generation. We don't need to get married. We don't need to go on dates, go looking, searching for someone for years. It's not necessary at all. It can all be done online and then in a laboratory. It's more efficient, it's cheaper, it's faster, way faster. Okay? And I think then that what we should do is we should put the DNA of the next generation and this generation, and maybe our parents, we should put it on the blockchain. Yeah, we should put it on the blockchain. So we can have a parental and parental chain, okay? Like a family tree, but it's determined by DNA, okay? We can put the DNA of every human on the blockchain, and the software, an AI can then analyze the DNA, and it'll tell a human, say in the year 2500, the parental chain, who their parents were for the last 500 years. They'll know for certain who their fathers and mothers were, and grandmothers and grandfathers. This approach is far more moral than the present arrangement, which I think uses a lot of dissimulation, and there's a lot of adultery and cheating and promiscuity. The modern humans are promiscuous. They're sexually immoral for the most part. This approach is far more moral. There's no lying, there's no cheating, there's nothing. There's no dissimulation. It's very straightforward. It's trustless procreation. And if I talk to my intellectual friends who are experts in biomedicine, they say, if we can put the DNA data on the blockchain for multiple generations, that type of data in the future, not now, can be used to help our progeny in the future. There are very advanced biomedical solutions available to the future generations if that data is available. So we should make it available for our progeny. So I plan to have kids, and I'm going to put the DNA of my kids on the blockchain. I'm going to call my family model the unified family, and we'll call the blockchain unified. And it'll allow people to know their entire family tree through DNA analysis. It'd be great. Can you imagine? Wouldn't it be great? Like, the year now is 2022. Like, wouldn't it be great if you know who your great-great-great-great-grandfather was in the year 1000? What he was doing? Where was he? Wouldn't that be amazing to know that much data? Even the year, like, 1000 BC, wouldn't it be amazing to know what your bloodline was doing back then? Well, your ancestors, who they were, what were they doing, what were they thinking? It'd be amazing to have that data and knowledge. I think it would really soothe the humans, help them psychologically. And so if we start doing this now, if we put our DNA on the blockchain now, and like we can put notes, we can keep notes for the future generations, personal notes for your progeny, I think we'll really stabilize the psychology of the future humans. They'll be more rooted. They'll know who they are, where they came from, who their ancestors really were as people, and what their hopes were for the future. So that's what I plan to do. And that's what I came up in January. And I've already started, some people, they often think that when I say something, it's always just theory, right? Like I'm a theoretician or something like that. But often when I say something, it just becomes the reality. And so I already made this the reality. So in January, I employed my old secretary in China. I told her, find me a candidate from one of the elite Chinese families to start the first unified family. And she found a woman. Her father is a Chinese aristocrat, so from one of the old Chinese families. And now we have our first baby on the way. And it's June. It's June 8th now. We did everything. And I'm in Thailand. That's why I came here. It's the specific purpose why I came here. She came here too. And it was very straightforward. I've had a lot of relationships with women, and almost always really great. But this has been the most honest and straightforward relationship I've ever had with a woman before. It's just straight as an arrow. Get the business done. Came here 6 weeks ago, and we already have a baby on the way. What happens is, I'm just going to break it down for you guys who want to do this, just to let you know how it works step by step. Okay? Employed my secretary, my old secretary. I said, find me a woman who wants to have a child using IVF. And she, under the understanding that her family can have custody of the future child. Okay? And she found that person within 2 weeks. And then we had 2 or 3 phone calls to discuss the terms of the contract. She made a nominal payment to me to seal the deal. Okay, so I accepted some monies so that it would be a fixed contract. You know, it wouldn't be hearsay or like just verbal nonsense. So it would be a strict contract between the two parties and two families. If you take payment, the contract has to be honored. So I took prepayment, and then I said I will honor the contract no matter what, and I have. I honored the contract to the letter. So I flew here, and what happens is my client, I called the mother of my future child my client. My client, they put her on hormone treatment to produce loads of eggs, and they were able to take out 9 eggs. Okay? And then they fertilized the eggs with my sperms. And the eggs grew to become embryos. 2 didn't make it, okay? And 2 were runts. They were like small. They were like small embryos. But they were okay, but they're just small. They were too small to allow for DNA analysis. Because if they're really small, they might be damaged, you know, by the DNA analysis. So that left 5.